I want to welcome all of you. My name is Ron Johnson. I'm the Senior Associate Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. I want to welcome you to an event that's been in the planning for a long time. And I want to introduce the young man responsible for facilitating this, Emmanuel Asamota. He's the Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion. And he's responsible for orchestrating all of this. He's the logistics person and my right hand, left hand, left foot, right foot, everything you can think, and brain at times. So you've got a very interesting session tonight. I want to kind of walk you through this. And it looks a little awkward at the moment is because we have an online version of this too that we're also trying to coordinate at the same time. So the agenda that you have in front of you starts with us basically two featured speakers, and then after the speakers speak, you get to eat. We never believe in feeding people beforehand because you might leave. So we're going to make you wait and hear the speakers, and then you get a chance to eat. We want to encourage you to eat a lot of food because there's a lot of food out there. I don't want to have to take it home. And during the time that the speakers end, we'd like you to write your questions down. You'll come back in with your food, and then you raise your questions, and we'll do those both online and in vivo or live. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two wonderful speakers. We're extremely fortunate to have two very talented women to speak to us on issues of healthcare disparities in medicine. And I want to start with Dr. Janelle Ali-Dinar. I'm going to read a brief bio of her. She is the CEO of Ponca Health Services and interim CEO Tribal Affairs, a national award-winning healthcare leader who has demonstrated value-based key leadership results as a regional executive, CEO, COO, and senior VP, from developing ACOs, provider contracts, and sales to regional clinical operations across the continuum of care, and provider performance to macro clinical leadership training, health equity, practice transformation. She works with Fortune 500 payer groups, healthcare systems from Los Angeles to the Middle East, Europe, rural America, and Native American populations. A well-respected policy program speaker at state, federal levels, she is a frequent on Capitol Hill and serves on several state national boards. We're extremely privileged to have her with us today. And I'll just say one other thing about her too. There was a possibility that we weren't going to be able to get her to speak tonight because she had a previous engagement at the White House. And so we had actually recorded, I don't know if we recorded it or not, we were going to record her for the night, but then she decided she's going to show up here. So this person is very special because I don't know, Emmanuel and I were talking today, we don't know if we would have done the same thing. So I love you, but not that much, okay? So welcome. Ms. Veta Jeffery. She is a president and CEO of the Greater Omaha Chamber. She has a great deal of experience in both public and private sectors. She was a manager of the Community Economic Development for the state of Missouri, having been appointed to the position by the Governor Jay Nixon. Governor Nixon formed the Office of Community Engagement following the Ferguson protests. And Ms. Jeffery's engagement skills helped rebuild the business community in and around Ferguson and throughout the St. Louis region. She helped to establish workforce development programs to assist underserved communities and helped to form the Governor's Fellows Program, a unique corporate public nonprofit partnership driving internships for disadvantaged college students in Missouri. And I'll just say too, because I know what Ferguson was like because I had to deal with it from a law enforcement perspective. So anyone who could go into that situation and help turn that around has some significant skills. So welcome. I will turn it over to Dr. Ali-Dinar. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? All right, and to our friends online, can you hear me? Someone is giving a virtual thumbs up, I'm sure. Well, I want to thank you all for being in attendance. Just as a quick setting the tone for myself, what year are some of you? Are some of you already practicing medicine? Some of you first, second, residency? Where are you in your spectrum of education? I see a lot of ones. You're number one. Yeah, number two. Number two's not bad either. Okay, and any others? Beautiful. Well, thank you for choosing healthcare, one of the most exciting, most powerful, most life-giving, life-changing, life-transforming industries to ever work in. And so you're all living legacies, and thank you for choosing what's difficult and selfless. And to all of you online, thank you for joining us. Also, I want to thank Dr. Johnson and Emmanuel. It's my humble honor. I was able to work out with the White House also, but I know my creators' priorities. And so with that, all things were able to be worked out. So it's my joy to be here. And you asked me months ago, so I wanted to keep my priorities straight. So when I was asked to give a visit with each of you about what it's like to work for a tribe and what that means within healthcare, where do I begin? Unbeknownst to myself before joining anything with the tribes, I had no idea that there are actually undergraduate and graduate programs throughout many curriculums across the United States and across the world. That is how complex, that is how comprehensive tribal affairs and Indian history is, and in the context of healthcare. So I'm going to share just a smidgen, and it really is just a thumbnail, but it's my joy to share that. So in the title, I tried to think what encompasses everything. So I selected the tribe of humanity. That is something that we can all get on board with. We have a vibration to uplift our souls. And so as a tribe, as a united universal tribe, whether we are native or not, we all choose humanity. We're a part of that community, and what can we do? So part of my mini thesis, if you will, is the tribe of humanity, identifying, applying, and uniting the path and pathways of healing determinants of health. And it's at this point that the slide was supposed to advance. Where is my technical assistance?
Any chance with the arrow work?
It worked before. Okay.
It should work now also.
Oh, very good. All right, so my second slide is my speaker disclosure. And so that is, of course, that I have no financial interest, arrangement, or consideration of conflict of interest with Creighton University, although I am dressed like a Creighton Blue Jay. I am not an alumni, but I do thank you for adapting and adopting me. I also want to thank my tribal affairs and my tribal council, because if it weren't for their continued support, there would be no opportunity for me to come here and be with you. So on behalf of them, thank you. I want to set the context by saying, as I started in the very beginning, that we are all gifted with life here on this universe with a spark of light and a purpose. And Native American tribal health celebrates, emulates, and grows and advances that spark of light within each of us. You, as future physicians, have every opportunity to not only enliven that within yourselves, but within your patients. So the high level of the determinants of health that we're going to cover this evening is, number one, the critical value of you. Number two, the historical treasure and status of Native Americans. Third, the past, present, and future of the tribes. Fourth, who we are and what we provide. Fifth, the disparities of critical mission. Sixth, closing the gap in milestones. Seven, the infinite possibilities within the mystery of one tribe of humanity, and the discovery process continues. Now, I know I'm only given so much time. I'll go by rumbling stomachs as part of that I need to stop and hand it over to Veta. So this is a bit of a disclosure on the Native American side. So just to give you a little bit of quick insight, there are 574 tribes across the United States. It includes 229 alone in the small state of Alaska. We are nations within a nation, and we are operated within the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is known as the BIA. You work in healthcare, you know there's a lot of acronyms, but Indian Health also has a lot of them. We receive funding through two streams, one Indian Health Services and one the Bureau of Indian Affairs. There are 63 state-recognized Native American tribes in 13 states. 10 of these tribes have state-recognized reservations. Some of them are sovereign, some of them are not sovereign. So the Ponca tribe, this is our preamble. It is always to restore, preserve, and protect. And it's not only about the descendants, it's about all community members. Our critical mission, so this is why it's especially an honor to be able to speak with you, is that everything that is within a tribal health, it stems around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Chief Standing Bear is our warrior. And if any of you know even a little bit of history, he is the one that is the first civil rights case in the United States. The Ponca Health is the only tribe in the state of Nebraska that does not have a reservation. At one time we did. There are two tribes, one in Nebraska and one in Oklahoma. Chief Standing Bear, or the home office, if you will, of the tribes is in Niobrara. We had a reservation there, a very sophisticated one, not teepees, homes, churches, very sophisticated. And he was taken off that land and he was told that he needed to leave. So within a blizzard, no moccasins, trailed down to Oklahoma. During that time, his son also passed away. Blizzards, January, no food. So the end of that story is that he became the first of the civil rights cases in fighting for not only his life, but fighting for the Ponca tribe. And by the time he was released, and he did have colonial or non-natives who believed in him. And in the courts, he spoke very eloquently. But he is known for saying, through the power of historical resilience, God made me and I am a man. Meaning that if you opened up my skin, I would bleed red as you do. And there is a movie that is going to be coming out that will also tell that story. There's a couple of other things with Chief Standing Bear. Again, we're the only ones that do not have a reservation, but if any of you have been to the Capitol, he has a large statue in the rotunda that's been there for just slightly over a year. The administrative office that is across from DHHS and across from the governor, which at one time never even allowed Indians, is now in Chief Standing Bear's name. And there's a high school in Lincoln that will open in March of 2023 that is the name of Chief Standing Bear. So we've been able to build some notoriety. As long as you have mystery, you have health. When you destroy mystery, you create comorbidity. Indigenous humans have always been the same because we have the mysticism and we permit the twilight to enter. So we practice with a patient-centered medical home model, and I'm sure that many of you already know what that is. The patient's in the center, you round with them, you ask them, what are your goals to make you well, healthy, go home, or whatever your goal is. The tribes were the very first of patient-centered medical home models. So while you may have on your name tags and on your degrees that you're physicians, providers, clinicians, in Native American health, this is who you would be. You are soul treaters and body healers. You are guiders and educators. You are vessels, listeners, soothers, teachers, searchers, inclusive, advocates, rooted in learning, advancing and innovating, curious, resilient, and culturally responsive. You empower the sacred stories, which are the living legacies. You operate with strength and vulnerability. You are friend and never foe, and never strangers. Our mission is to provide holistic, caring, family-centered, culturally sensitive services through a quality clinical and educational approach. And although, again, as I mentioned before, we don't have a reservation, we do operate 45 plus services in each of our federally qualified health centers. We operate in 15 counties within the state of Nebraska, as well as Iowa and South Dakota. Our sacred approach is that we're only as healthy as the least healthy patient. So we've come a long way. We operate with a lot of innovation, precision medicine, lots of different types of diagnostic tools. And although we've come a long way and we have great surveys and we have great outcomes, we still are humble enough to recognize we have a long journey. So we rate ourselves accordingly by the least healthiest of all patients. Our Ponca wisdom and my strategic leadership are around 1, resilience, restoration, and preservation. 2, that we operate within a sacred soul. We have mind, body, and spirit that we cannot escape from and must treat. We are sustainable and sovereign. We practice with innovation. We are the passage from youth to elder, and we are the trail of tears to the trail of triumph. Now, for any of you that have heard of the social determinants of health, which are, do I have food? Do I have water? Do I have safety? Do I have areas maybe where there is victimization, maybe domestic violence? Do I have chronic diseases? Do I have safety in my home? Is there elder abuse? Are there learning disabilities? Are there housing or transportation needs? That on the right side actually represents the very first, which is the medicine wheel that asks the very same things, only it aligns it with the chakras and the meridians of the body. So our strengths and our lessons in how we embody our care for Native Americans, which again should transcend to each of you, is to take a look and apply the social determinants of health, because who you're treating is not just a chronic disease. They are not just the DNA. They are a body, mind, and soul who at any given time have a vulnerability, but we operate under the lens of pride and will never own up to where our true needs are. But if we ask and round the questions of what are your needs, people will open up and they will share those vulnerabilities, because in the end, we're strong, but we're so fragile. Second, elder care is very important. The hierarchy of elder is not disposable. It's all about that sacred wisdom and being able to operate into feeding into the next generation. So elder care and addressing health education and advocacy is very important. Youth health and accountability, advancing health literacy, which is part of your equity, discussing health disparities and closing those gaps to care, health literacy advancements, cultural competencies, cultural bias, cultural safety, and cultural safety is the preservation of language, and then awareness, sensitivity, and equity, and then the recognition that we are on a soul journey through sacred identity and 2 spirits. 2 spirits means if I have a gender question about who I am, I'm not sure who my identity is. Native Americans recognize that, and rather than to treat it as a threat or as a sickness or an illness or anything else that is unacceptable, they recognize it as the 2 spirits. This next slide is how complex we break everything down in terms of socially, physically, emotionally, cognitively, constructively, spiritually. We break down our connectivity. This just gives you a slide of an indication of how many Native Americans are in each of the areas. We are obviously in the Great Plains area. And I think we get so used to working in our own communities, in our own households, in our own circles that we forget the relevancy and the size of some of these populations. And again, this is another breakdown, only this breakdown is based on how funding is. So funding comes from 3 sources: IHS, the CDC, and then CDC and the IHS. This is an important slide because this represents in COVID, we've seen an increase in behavioral health. So in our own services, which are located in Lincoln, 2 in Omaha, Norfolk, Sioux City, and Niobrara, plus the 15 counties, Iowa, and then South Dakota. Behavioral health, we offer 5 days a week, child pediatric counseling, classes on elder abuse, expanded health transit needs, in-home services and diagnostic care, sacred parenting and wellness, We have a lot of focus on domestic violence, social services, pantries, and outreach. We have a very large need for recognizing that the murdered women disappearance and the national model to discover and find them. The expanded CHW, which is a community health model, wellness activities, elder sewing and cooking. Our community health worker model is actually recognized as the #1 in the state, as well as #3 in the nation. So we do an immense amount of work around reaching the needs of both our rural, underserved, and Native American populations. We also have tribal courts, which also falls under tribal affairs. So we have our own foster and adoptive care system. Native foods, which is another area of tribal affairs. It's healing, medicinal health plants, sweat lodges, community and healing gardens, language inclusion, art and dance therapies, and as I mentioned, Chief Standing Bear's DC and local recognition. So just to give you a very quick glance on the disparities. Native Americans are twice as likely as whites to have diabetes, and every 2 out of 3, obviously the diabetes being the largest pathway of chronic diseases into other secondary, 3rd and 4th diseases, kidney failure is second. Kidney failure has dropped 54% between 1996 and 2003 through a couple of incredible models that we have through our ECHO programs that we have with IHS, plus being able to do medical and medicine pharmacology, your DNA precision medicine, where you're according to your own DNA and not necessarily just who you are as a tribe, but getting down to your specificity. As well as recognizing that blood sugar, blood pressure are all heightened through stress and environmental needs, all the more reason to invoke and practice social determinants of health. So these are some of the percentages that we've been able to see through our hypertension models, diabetes, blood sugar control. And so those are impressive. Now, those were pre-COVID. It would be interesting now in our surveys, which have not come back yet, what the uptick changes will have been. My guess is that we may have seen some increases that we need to recalibrate and address. Telehealth is huge in our body of work. And then again, patient-centered medical home model, you can kind of see where we've been able to make some strides in our care. The Ponca tribe in Nebraska, we have 300+ employees. We have 40,000+ patient encounters. And within the state of Nebraska, we have over 5,000 members and 25,000+ across the nation. These are some of our milestones. These are 3 of our FQHCs. So in the Fred Leroy, which is in Omaha, we offer psychiatry, pediatrics, women's health, clinical pharmacy, remote monitoring, and telehealth. Some of those same ones in Norfolk, as well as our newest, which is in Lincoln, which is just opened in March 21st. And already in the last 6 months, we've been able to see 650 behavioral health cases, 900+ prescriptions, 800+ medical cases, and 195 dental cases. So when you come to our facility, you're able to receive mental health, counseling, tribal healing and CERCLA, talking circles, youth to elder to family care, sacred men and women counseling, pharmacy, pharmacology, diagnostic, primary care, specialty care, and dental care. So truly, we're a one-stop shop. Our milestones next within Ralston, which if you know where the Ralston High School is, where we're just east on the other side, is we're getting ready to launch a 125,000-foot square space that will have additional 250 employees, and we will have that done within the next 2 years. That will have 45 different specialties. Our milestones for some additional joint venture specialties are our gastro, cardiology, orthopedics, urology, ENT, pulmonology, pain management, and then our specialty cares of audiology, podiatry, and eye care. Our other milestones are we have right now over $45 million worth of grants that we've received just in this year alone. And then some of our largest awards that we've received are in rural health, medication med assistance, early childhood, and tribal hold visiting. And for many, we're the only recognized tribe either in the Great Plains region or in over half of the United States or in the United States to receive these grants. We have over 100 partnerships locally. You'll see your own Creighton University is one of them. And then, as I had mentioned before, our community health and outreach are our largest. Mobile mammograms, elder groups, COVID-19 support, our pantries, our public health. 5 years ago, nobody would have known public health. They would have said, what is my role? That's someone else's role. Public health district, maybe. Now, since COVID, everybody knows, hey, I have a role to play. And so public health, population health are very large in how we treat, acknowledge, and advance through our innovation. And then education is very large. We're getting ready to roll out a curriculum that is in the Ponca language, and we'll be the first ones to work with UNL for a true native language that is a part of a higher education system. And then we were first on the scene within the tribes, recognized at the state level and by Governor Ricketts for our milestones that we were able to incorporate in our response to COVID-19. And then in the future, we have our innovation expanded models. We're getting ready to be JACO certified for many of you who know what those certifications are and how difficult those are. We have an expanded buffalo program. We have bison, several hundred herd on several thousand acres. And so we're getting ready to process those. Those are used, again, through Native American. We repurpose everything, everything being from the Great Spirit, the Creator, is part of then our diabetes wellness program, as well as our outreach. And then the casino is getting ready to launch a new site, and we'll do a farm to table, as well as our food tastings and our native healing programs. We're all about sovereignty and sustainability. We are HRSA recognized. Our dental procedures are, we're getting ready to launch implants and Invisalign, so very sophisticated with that. We're one of the key partners with the USDA. And then expansion into Sioux City, a new building and partnership. And then you'll see down in the far right corner, we have a mobile unit, an RV that will be arriving in the next 2 weeks that we'll be able to take out, and it will offer primary care, specialty care, counseling, diagnostic, and dental. And we'll also be able to do food delivery. So that is an incredible thing, because there are only 5 tribes in the entire nation that actually have an RV. So this allows us to not only go down the I-80 or all those other highways, but it builds our brand integrity of outreach. And then recognizing, as I hope that each of you will recognize as you pursue the fascinating area of medicine and advancement, that we are one tribe of humanity, striving to grow in the essence of the spark within us that is imbued upon us by the Creator. And therefore, it is always about giving back, paying for, paying forward, and your living legacy begins now. Why wait? So thank you. I want to add to our friends who are virtual, as well as each of you. You have what is, I think, an important takeaway to reference as you listen to some of the things that are happening within the Supreme Court, things that are happening within the state. You'll hear a little bit more about these cases. Some of them are about boarding schools, some of them are about foster care, but there's an important toolkit for you to reference. And chronologically speaking, these are historical documents also that I'm sure that you will reference at some point. But it also gives some unique statistical information also. Federal recognition. I think if you want one of the most rewarding areas to work within medicine, that is an area to work within. And again, you have lots of levity within federally qualified health centers in your treatment of care as well. So thank you for your time, your energy, your commitment, and it's Generosity Tuesday. So I thank you for being generous with your hearts and your minds. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're in a transition period here, and Dr. Jeffery's going to come up in a second here as soon as we get her mic'd up. Yes, go on. She's going to just switch mics with you. Okay. I thought you were the Empress. So I was. Or what was the new title?
I am the president CEO. She called me Dr. Jeffery.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I want to falsely represent.
Okay, next time I'll read.
You're good.
Okay, am I good? That was a phenomenal presentation. I'm sitting here trying to listen and take notes and make sure to be prepared. And I learned a great deal from that. So, first, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for being here. Hello to you and happy Tuesday. I started off 30 plus years ago. I'll stop with 30. Starting my days off with happy whatever day so that I could keep track of the day of the week, because unfortunately, sometimes we run in so many different directions that we can lose sight of that. So happy Tuesday to you all. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to come before you, taking part in this particular symposium. I want to thank Creighton University. I absolutely want to thank Emmanuel for all of the efforts he put forth to make certain to get us here and make certain that we could present before you tonight. And I have even been able to gain so much just from listening to Dr. Janelle and her presentation. So I'm very grateful for that. Your symposium is absolutely a great step in just starting conversations in our community about showing intentionality and a great work that has to be done, and how to utilize your roles where you are currently to make a difference in space, in these spaces and in these conversations. At the Chamber, our program is diversity, inclusion. Uh-oh, am I killing something? Oh, that's not me. Go ahead, I can move. Is that what they're seeing? Sorry, guys. And I am so technologically challenged. I can offer nothing here. But understanding our program is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And regardless of how we look at the semantics, the goals have to be, how do we take the information that we have, our positions that we have, how do we take the intentionality that we function with and make positive and effective change in the areas where we've been set out to do so. I was fortunate to land in Omaha in this role in June of this year. I took on the position of the Greater Omaha Chamber President and CEO, and picking up and shifting your family. I can't say across the country because we only came from St. Louis, Missouri. I can't even say that we shifted our family into a completely different climate, because weather-wise, St. Louis and Omaha are very similar. However, the wind in Omaha is absolutely different. It's a biting wind, so I dare say it's colder here. The 23 here is different than 23 there. But making the choice to pick your family up and move, regardless of that, what that move looks like, is not something that people can take lightly. And so when I came into the opportunity to take on this role, I had to look at what my role would be. What's the role of the Greater Omaha Chamber? How do they serve? How do they serve community? What's the community like? What's the climate like? What's the culture like? We have a 12-year-old child. Our 12-year-old daughter left her tribe at home. And of course, being 12, Your tribe is everything. That's the time when you're coming into who you are, or at least you're starting the conversation with self. And that's that group that protects you, who gets to, who you share all of your innermost thoughts with. And coming from a St. Louis, that thought process is that there's not a tribe in Omaha for me. There's not a group. I'm not going to find people to connect with going to Omaha. I've never even thought about Omaha, as I put my best 12-year-old daughter voice on. And so in picking her up and moving her to complete spaces, these were things that we had to think about, things that we had to address, and us figuring out, was the work here something that we could bring value to? Was the focus of the community? What were the universities focused on? What are the universities focused on here? What are the studies that the hospitals are doing? How would my work that I gained from Ferguson make a difference? Or would it make a difference? Or would it even allow me to make impact? It's been my experience that the best way to approach a task of such a move of this magnitude was to schedule time to focus on listening. One of the key components that we had to do behind Ferguson was something that was completely unexpected, unforeseen, and a complete shock to those of us that lived through it, because it thrust our city into an international I will say stage, onto an international stage when we had no idea, and in the worst way possible. And one of the things in my role, then Governor Nixon created our roles just about I was gonna say 2.5 days, but a week after Ferguson happened, he knew that he wanted to create an office that could hit the ground and figure out. And so within 30 days, we were up and running. Now, that's an interesting thing for me to say to you today, because at the time Ferguson erupted, I was back in corporate America, working in private industry. And I actually took a call that caused me to pack up my belongings, leave my job, and go serve my community. And most people don't go from private industry to public service. It's just not a thing that people do. However, it was absolutely an opportunity that could not be passed. And in creating our job, the Office of Community Engagement, the role was to figure out what caused Ferguson, and how do we calm life down, and how do we find out how to make sure this doesn't ever happen again? It's not too big a thing to do. You know, there were 3 of us. We could do that, right? But in looking at it, one of the things that I took away in such a great way was the understanding that all that we had before us had to start by listening. How do we take the time to just start having conversations and spending the time in those meetings listening? And so we brought together some very, very unlikely groups and positioned them to have safe space to talk about what their feelings were, what their anxieties were, what their frustrations were, what are their pain points, and what do they see as some of the opportunities to bring solution or fix. So when I landed here in Omaha, I brought with me those same takeaway experiences. So I hit the ground focused on, how do I spend my time listening to Omaha to understand what are the pain points? What are some of the things that are being experienced here? Are the people here comfortable in their space? Do they feel like they have safe space to be who they are? Is there space for belonging here and understanding what their specific identities are? What are the conversations that are being had? And that's what I kind of embarked upon in the months since my husband our 12-year-old daughter, and our 2 dogs landed here. My career and my passion have focused on how communities shape themselves and how they set a course for the future and the role that I could play in those processes. My hope in coming here today was to be able to focus on a few things. I wanted to be able to spend a moment and just talk about some of the things I've learned over my careers, some of the things I've dealt with, the different values, the different opinions, and even adversity that bring good conversation and good learning opportunities. I'd also like to establish a path forward. In that path forward, I'd like to be able to offer you points of focus for you to be able to think about as you complete your program here. And then, of course, one of the most important things I'd like to be able to talk to your group in particular will be about perspective. For context, I want to give you a little bit of background information about myself, absent of Ferguson, and the significance of us having this conversation today. So before coming to take on this role at the Chamber, I spent 20+ years working in the financial service industry. So I worked as a manager of financial advisors. I jokingly tell people my goal was to try to teach a team of people to help folks not die broke, because sometimes it seems like that people attack that with intentionality as well. And we had to dissuade them from that thinking. But I also served as a senior vice president in banking, working on the commercial lending side of banking. But I had a wonderful opportunity in my banking stint to help write policy and help create products, because St. Louis actually, unbeknownst to many, for years was the #1 city in the country in having the most unbanked and underbanked. And the reason that's so fascinating is St. Louis is actually home to more financial institutions than any other city in the country. But for whatever reason, we hadn't found ways to connect those two. In looking at the other aspects of my career that I think are important for us to have a sneak peek at today, I held public office for 6 years. I was elected into office long enough to know that I shouldn't be in public office. I'm very grateful to those that are, but it is absolutely not for the faint at heart. And so you should be very kind to those that choose to serve in those roles. I have directly served at our highest levels of public service at the state level and local government. I ran my own business for 10 years. I've held board positions locally and nationally. In my career, I worked hard and I learned to take something from all of those circumstances that I encountered. I rose to reach great high levels in leadership, but not without challenge, which is why I want to talk about perspective. When I got into these wonderful levels and positions, I made it a point to create policies and to create opportunities so that we can create environments where equity was at the forefront of our deliverables. And I understand that having equitable conversations is not one that's been easy, but is necessary if we're going to change things economically. As a leader, I found very quickly, and data shows that businesses are better able to find success when they offer inclusive environments and diverse environments. Our key data points even speak to life expectancy based on zip codes in which you were born. So in Omaha, if you were born, if I could use UNMC, and I chose UNMC because when we first landed here, we were within blocks of walking to the UNMC. So zip code 68105. And then during my interviewing process, I had to take a lot of questions asking if I would engage in the economics in North Omaha and South Omaha if I took this position. Quite naturally, yes. And so if I look at 68105, which is the zip code for UNMC, and I look at the center of North Omaha at 68110, there's an 8-year difference in life expectancy just by where you are born. Not because of lifestyle that comes out, it's where you were born and how where you were born affects decisions, opportunities, what you're exposed to, all of that. If I look at economic impact, our ability to earn addresses the social determinants of our communities, and we have to look at the generational impacts that that has. Minority, I understand that another piece of history for Omaha was looking at in the 1960s and early 70s, when Omaha lost its meatpacking plants, it also lost its Black middle class. I found out in conversations that a lot of the minority families that had gained some economic stability did so through those high-paying, steady positions. And since that time, we've not replaced it in North or South Omaha to the extent where those families could earn the high incomes and be able to make differences generationally. So now we're looking at where you're born, and we're also looking at where you work and your ability to earn. Chambers have to focus on the health of businesses and how do we help our businesses grow. So if we look at further data, we're able to make a case for understanding that diverse companies are able to enjoy 2 to 3 times higher cash flow per employee. Diverse management boasts of revenue by at least 19% higher when they have diverse leadership at the management level. 43% of the companies with diverse boards saw higher profits, and then more than 3 out of 4 workers prefer to work in diverse companies. If we also look at how DEI workspaces are driven, gives us the following benefit. We have better creative thinking, better problem solving, diversity of thought, perspective, and decision-making. We have higher innovation, higher employee engagement, and we reduce employee turnover. And the listening sessions that I did when I landed here in Omaha, when I was sitting with our CEOs and I'm sitting with heads of our universities and having conversations, even with our elected officials, I would always ask, what are the pain points here in town? I'm new, I'm getting to know, I want to understand what problems we should solve. And one of the major pain points that I heard over and over again was attraction and retention of talent. That allowed me to do a deep dive and say, what are some of the causes? What are some of the reasons that people are not staying here? And they would always say, Veta, we've got to be able to help our young people stay. Now, guys, I got to tell you something. Don't kick me out. Every city has a migration of young talent. Because when kids grow up, you know, we've spent so much time telling them what to think, what to eat, how to walk, how to talk, what to do, all of that, that their first thought is, I got to get away as far as I can. So it's not always they're trying to get away from the city. Sometimes it's us. Now, we're not real enough to tell ourselves that, but it's a true thing. So our focus, in addition to how do we make certain that we attract and retain our talent, also has to be intentionality on how we create space to attract our children to come back to what we've created. Go out, spread your wings, enjoy, learn. Now, if there are many of you that are here today that are not from Omaha, this next statement is not about you. You're where you're supposed to be. Keep that in mind. But cities have to get strong on making certain that we create space to bring our children back. You all stay. They need to come back. But that focus has to be on what does it take to build community? How do we look at making sure our next generation of leaders, how do we focus on making sure that our next generation of doctors, our medical students have everything they need to be able to call Omaha home and feel like this is a great place to live, to work, to build community, to create tribe and grow and raise our children. And looking back to when I first started my career, I was always seeking advice on how can I approach being successful in my workplace and in community. So now when I'm asked that same advice, I try to draw on what I've learned in my journey and share those things. If I look at it from a three-pronged perspective, I've looked at perspective really does matter. So give me a moment to give you perspective on why that's necessary. Typically, I don't know if any of you are married or have considered getting married, but typically in going into marriages, one spouse, one partner may have been raised in an environment where mom or dad handled finances. The other partner may have been raised in an environment where the other handled finances. So mom in one, dad in the other. And we're bringing these two people together. I'm handling the money because my dad did. Well, I'm handling the money because my mom did. Right? Perspective. How do we bring those different thoughts and ideas to say, how about we both work on this together? Your perspective matters because each of you come from different backgrounds, different experiences, different thoughts, different upbringings, different goals, ideas, and interests and outcomes. And that matters, which is why I say you have to stay in Omaha. Finding commonality, recognizing that we really are more alike than we are different. Recognizing that one of the pieces that was brought about in the presentation that I've heard used so effectively over the years, although it always feels violent when I retell it, but if we cut, we all look the same. Our blood is red, our hearts are pumping, and typically we all want the same things. But find those ways that we can have commonality. And then lastly, in those three prongs, never, ever, ever, ever shrink back. Use your talents for good. Use your skills for transformation. One of the things that's always been fascinating to me is how once you become a doctor, you automatically become an expert at everything. So people think that we can go to our doctors and you can fix our car, you can fix our homes, you can tell us the best foods, you can tell us everything, right? But what that means is that's influence. And in that influence, you have an opportunity to use your influence for transformation. The lessons I've learned didn't come easy. I worked my way into wonderful leadership positions. I found myself often a dual minority. I'd look around the room and see that not only was I typically only one of maybe 3 women, but I was often the only minority in the room. I had to learn not to shrink back, and that wasn't easy because it's easier to say, I'll just stay here and be quiet. But I learned that there were too many things I needed to figure out. So I had to find ways to be courageous enough to be my authentic self. even when that means that sometimes being my courageous self and being my authentic self means that I've been termed aggressive or strong-willed. And it's fascinating because for me, it's just being me, but for others, and maybe I dare say, it doesn't feel Nebraska nice when I seek to get a good understanding of what I'm dealing with in my environment. The disparities discussed today need strong advocates. We need advocates like you in utilizing your influence to help heal communities. Now, I never try to put more on people than is due, but I absolutely want to make sure that we understand the intentionality that we have to work with. So as I talk out of both sides of my mouth in saying this, we've got to find our space. You have to find out, how do I use my influence? How do I use my role? How do I make sure that I'm healing bodies, but I also can effectuate change in community? But here's the other side. You also have to find balance. In the role that I play as the president and CEO of the chamber, I have two additional roles that are so near and dear to my heart. My job as a mother and my job as a wife. So I know what it's like to have the tug of my heart from a mother's perspective, pulling me to come back home so I can participate in driving my daughter to the many things that she has, so I can be there for homework, so I can do all the things that happen in the latter part of the day. But yet there are important meetings that have to take place at Creighton University that you would miss the White House to attend, because this work is so important as well. I also know what it's like to be from an executive's perspective, when we have major companies that are looking at shifting and moving, but there are still those pieces happening that make us want to be in two places at once. When we're in the minority, we have to bring perspective for those that we're serving. We have to make certain that others can join us at the table to balance out our conversations. When we're not in the minority, we have to use our position to invite minorities to the table. So I can't begin to think that because I'm a woman, I can speak for all women, nor can I, as an African-American, speak for all African-Americans. So I have to be intentional of creating opportunity for diversity of thought. And that's an opportunity we all share. This is what cultural competence is about. It's about knowing ourselves, understanding the value that we bring, looking outward to see what others bring from their own perspectives as well. I now recognize that by being a female executive offers me several benefits. I know firsthand the necessity for women and diverse voices to be at the table, and I'm now able to see that it's important to have different voices in meetings. Behind Ferguson, we would not have been able to work our way out had we not been able to bring grassroots leaders to the table with our political leaders, with our CEOs, with our foundational leaders, to be able to come together in conversation and talk about what is it that created this powder keg that caused Ferguson to explode, and how do we make sure that it doesn't continue to exist? Most people thought that this was simply about the atrocity of the loss of one child's life, when it was absolutely about the atrocities of not being able to communicate through differences just based on what zip codes people were born in. Each of you here today have something unique about you that makes you you. Don't hide that uniqueness. Use it. Tap into it to gain a stronger understanding of those around you. Each of you have roles that you serve in academically, professionally, and personally here in this community. And in some shape, form, you contribute to what makes this city such a wonderful place that we're finding it. People have asked me, Omaha? And they're so surprised. I think they're actually waiting to hear us say, yeah, no, this isn't working. And when we tell them we really like it here, they're surprised. We have joint interest in seeing the growth of the future here. My hope is that we've been able to paint pictures steep in establishing or continuing a culture of growth and inclusivity, where we understand that a rising tide will lift all boats. John F. Kennedy said, change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. Our focus has to be how to learn from what's been behind us, but how we shape what's in front of us. So as I close, I feel like I've talked way over my time. I want to say that in this room, not only should we have interest of what the future looks like, but we have responsibility of taking the initiative of shaping what our future gets to look like, making sure that we have a hand in telling the next iteration of where Omaha is going, and being part of that story. Being engaged in your profession, being engaged in your community, and making a difference. Creighton has a long history, a deep-seated history of being part of critical discussions and critical issues. Dr. Janelle shared even some of that history with us in her delivery today. At the Chamber, our focus has to be, how do we build the business community? How do we build the dirt? How do we make sure that what goes in the dirt is going to be transformative? How do we make sure that the people that will participate in what comes out of what we erect on top of the dirt, lives are changed as well? How do we make sure that we find equity in the zip codes that are here, so that 20 years from now, we won't have that 8-year differences? There are some zip codes that are even greater. Those are just the 2 that I looked at. But how do we make sure that we create a place to where our children grow, their children grow, and the place that we now call home is one where we get to be so excited? Because Omaha, I find, like unlike many other cities around the country, is doing such a phenomenal job in telling this story. All the tools are here. Omaha has great bones, great people, great structure, great vision, great foundations, great opportunities to continue to be thought leaders for the rest of the company to shape their development from, based on what's being created here. My charge to you today is to be successful leaders. Progress requires your engagement, always moving forward, always motivating yourself and your peers, being consistent in your commitment to creating the environment that is diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible. I ask you students here to be willing to share your ideas, ask for seats at the table, and don't sit back quietly, but also be willing to learn from those around you. Be the change that the cities around you need to help grow. Be intentional to be a part of the solution, recognizing that we get more from intentional actions than we can from unexpected reactions. Be intentional about spending time in diverse groups after 5 and on weekends. Be intentional about voting and voicing perspective. Keeping in touch with one another, keeping in touch with our organizations, keeping in touch with the Greater Omaha Chamber. And know that change is possible, but it takes all of us being intentional for that change and to take place. Guys, I appreciate you allowing me to come speak before you today. I'm very grateful for the opportunity that's been created, and I look forward to hearing the success that all of you will bring in completing this program and being instrumental in changing the communities that you're part of. Thank you.
For all of you who are in, very impressive leadership positions, this might be a bit of a personal question, but what is your approach to, these problems that are so large and seemingly unsolvable? Like I guess that's generally the question is, how do you approach that every day and work with your team and motivate a team to solve these things that are just so big?
I'll take first, if that's okay. I need a microphone. So your question is, how do you tackle big problems that even sometimes seem insurmountable? Is that a good summation? Huge question. So here's why I was willing to take that first. Being the president and CEO of a chamber is a big job. The Greater Omaha Chamber, we are like 7th in the nation. It's a huge chamber with great opportunities in how we serve. Our membership is nearing about 3,000. Omaha is home to about 64 companies that are headquartered here, and we have about 983 companies that have a presence here that are headquartered somewhere else. So big job. And then I added to taking on this position being from out of town. So that means I don't know the land, the people, the politics, the history, all of that. So whenever I get up every day and go to work and try to tackle this wonderful thing, I recognize that I have to eat this elephant one chunk at a time. I can't look at, oh my God, there are 50 plates spinning right now. I have to look at what are the things that I have to do? What are the main focuses that I have to make certain to address? And how do I take that one step at a time? So I don't step back and look at, oh my God, all of this. I don't know the people. I can't remember. I called them the wrong name. I give myself grace. I'll make mistakes, sometimes small, sometimes huge. A couple of weeks ago, huge mistake. But I've learned to give myself grace and just learn from them, from the mistakes, and get better. But I never, ever, ever try to take on, oh my God, there's this huge thing. I look at, how do I take the bite that I've got to take, be effective at it, and then go after that next one. So I know that sounds a little cliche-ish, but it's my truth, so.
It's a hard answer to follow. Generally, the approach has been is that I think innovation, and I can't afford on behalf of anyone to be at the status quo. So generally, strategically, I think about where's the destination point. Somebody's going to be at the destination point, and it might as well be us. And as I told my husband when we lived in Los Angeles and we were coming back to my home state of Nebraska, I promise you we will be at the center of something and not in the middle of nowhere. I'm still striving to find that complete destination. But the point is that you're at the right place at the right time. You just may not know it and you may not appreciate it, but you are. So generally, from a strategic operational standpoint, surround myself with people who are key stakeholders and experts in areas that I will know nothing about, that they have an abundance of information. And why do we make things so difficult? When the wheel was first created, why do we keep reinventing the wheel? We owe it to ourselves and to one another that if you own a gem, if you are an expert, a knowledge-based person, if you have something that can be activated and harnessed, you owe it to others to duplicate it so that their lives and their pathway can be easier than what it currently is. And that's part of that paying back, paying for, paying forward, because that ripple effect, the globe is here. And so Strategic planning is very important. These symposiums are very important. And coming back together from COVID, being Zoom masters and other types of technological platforms that we all learned to be relatively savvy at. Appreciate the proximity of the human spirit and the heartbeat and bringing great minds together. So talking and more talking, we will never do enough of that. But planning and strategic planning. Within healthcare, there generally is 10-year plans. Great strategic plans used to be 3 and 5 years. Now they're at best living documents for a year. But the destination point is always moving. Keep being forward thinking in these discussions that as we build models and models of care, which again, healthcare is one of the best ones because as long as you're alive, you need healthcare. So think about where's the destination point? And if you think about that, you can apply that to every facet of your lives. And for that, you will keep advancing.
Other questions?
Let's check chat.
Great, yes, yes.
So in July of 2021, it was reported that Native Americans had the highest number of COVID vaccinations, and we also heard about other minority populations struggling with vaccine rates. Why do you think the Native Americans' reception of the COVID-19 vaccine was so successful, and what rollout implementation helped the population get vaccines so quickly in the province?
Great question. Number one, as I had mentioned, tribal council. So that is our solid infrastructure that helps make policies and procedures. They were committed to it. Again, Native Americans generally lead in diabetes and other chronic diseases. And when you recognize that you have a suppressed immune system, you can't be suppressed and remote in how you're going to live life. So if you know that there is something, even experimental, not FDA approved, but you know that there's something out there that's rapidly an answer, we onboarded it immediately through our community health model, and we mandated it. And we had no pushback, except for a few employees who for personal or professional or religious reasons chose not to, and that was fine. But generally speaking, we had this sense of oneness, a sense of we need to grow our own, take care of our own. And if we take care of our own, our public health commitment is going to emulate to the rest of the communities that we're in because we're taking care of you also. So that mandate was an easy process and procedure to do. And we had community health team members, 6 of them, and they, for many of you, and you probably were either in grade school or maybe you hadn't even been born yet. There used to be a long time ago a telecommunications company called MCI. And their big thing was, and you tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends. And that was the whole model that we used, is that we told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends. And then we became part of healing circles. And what were the healing circles? COVID vaccinations. And we went out on the road and we had RVs that didn't have our name on it yet, but we went to where people were. And that's how we built it and we champion it. We didn't let the politicking, the bureaucracy, or any of those things take place. We thought about public health and in the interest of living longer, healthier lives. And we've tried to duplicate that within other tribes who also, launched some of those same very successful initiatives, and as well as rural health and other minority communities as well. But tribal council is to whom we owe a lot of that too, is that they were great role models.
I don't think anything needs to follow that, but what I will say, I sat on the side of how when funding first landed, CARES funding and testing started, and how we had to communicate to try to break down. And we were having conversations about what was being successful on the tribal side as opposed to why we were having such a hard time in community. We looked at access to information caused a huge problem. Those that had access to internet and television, and they were caught in the political piece of the fear that was created in not taking the vaccinations. And that was such a barrier that had to be worked through. That leads straight to the point of that question. So I love hearing it from your perspective because there was just a lot of late night conversations and trying to figure out how do we get in front of these self-imposed barriers to start trying to help the communities that had access but not willingness. So.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I have two, but I guess I will pick one. So this one is for is it Dr. Jeffery? Is that what we should call you?
No.
No, just,
I thank you for that.
okay.
No, Vita's fine.
Vita. Okay, this one's for Vita. So you talked about making room for diversity at the table and like how you can't speak for all women and like I can't speak for all gays and like the pool here is relatively small. And so what's a good way to like make room at the table for people that are in like a minority population, but maybe like don't want to be like publicly acknowledged as being in that, but like whose opinion would be greatly valued?
Absolutely. So how do you make room at the table?
Yeah.
When you're in the minority?
Yeah, but like there are others in the minority that maybe don't want to speak up.
So how do you be the voice when those around you don't want to use their voice?
No,
I'm
like
trying
how,
to make sure I'm understanding the question.
how do you make it a more comfortable and safe space so that people that are in minority populations are more willing to like speak up?
Absolutely. Got it. How do you make it safe space so that people who are in minority feel comfortable speaking up? Absolutely. Okay. I think we have to be willing to be able to voice perspective to create that safe space. I had to learn to get comfortable talking about my own experiences. So I don't talk about things I've heard. I talk about things that I know. So I am probably way too open, but I've learned that in my sharing my experience, I give others safe space to share theirs. I also had to take away some of the stigma that exists in always having conversations that are safe. So I had to learn to be willing to talk about what my experience was as a minority and as a female. I chose financial services, and financial services for years was an aging older white male career. And so I had to learn to share that, but the heart that I'm sharing it with is not from condemning, it's explaining this was my experience. So now when I talk about, in my role, I always had people that would come to me and tell me, go find the person that was in charge. And I was the person that was in charge and they didn't want to accept that. And so I've learned to use my experiences to give others safe space to talk about theirs, because we do have to create community. All of us have differences where we need that okay to be okay. And so in talking about mine, I encourage others to talk about theirs. And I encourage us then to engage in those conversations. I had a great conversation yesterday, I'll say this, with a member, one of our business leaders that's looking to change. You know, when I came to Omaha, people say, Nebraska's a red state and we got all of these things and nobody wants to live here because of that. So are you going to come? And so I always ask, where are the tables where those hard conversations are happening, where there can be safe space where people are not judged? What I've learned over the years is there are people that have questions about things that are natural to my family. My baby girl likes to wear a fro. Now, her mother sometimes likes for her to wear it differently, but her in her most comfortable space is she'll have a big fro. And there are people that want to come ask questions. They don't mean any harm, but they want to ask about it. I'm so curious. And I've learned to give people that safe space. Let's talk about it. Let's ask questions. You allow me to ask questions and I'll allow you to ask questions. That way, it won't be so odd. It won't be so unusual. And I can learn the things that I have to learn. So another very TMI moment for me. I had to go to my daughter, my young up and coming professional, and I told her she's my safe space. And I said, listen, I'm not sure how I feel about this whole thing of the changing of the dictionary. I'm not, my mind can't wrap itself around a singular becoming a plural, because she would always say they, and I'm looking for they. What are they? Yeah, well, they so and such. I wanted to understand they. And I had to get uncomfortable, getting comfortable so that I could understand pronouns and what they meant and make sure and ask for grace, because in learning, I was sure going to say something stupid or something where I just wasn't getting it. So what that gave me was grace to others when they came for me in my Blackness and needed to ask me something as well. I'm like, yeah, these are learning curves. So I try to create safe space because I had so much learning to do myself. So events like this help a lot, or we can just talk about we're more alike than we are different. And let's talk about what that looks like. So sorry for the long answer, but I had to be able to approach it from all those different perspectives. No, it's just me, okay.
Okay, so we have one more question back here. Yes, sir.
Hi, sorry. So one thing that's like always frustrated me a little bit with diversity is that we do so well in like creating a diverse class, you know, where like we have people of very different backgrounds, but it's so often that those people of different backgrounds, those minorities, they like constantly gravitate towards each other. And then the same thing happens with like the white, like majorities, like white people, you know, like they constantly gravitate towards each other. And I've noticed that in our class a little bit. I've noticed that in like various other workspaces where like our friend groups are people of different minorities. So I guess my question is, how can we successfully and more naturally interconnect the people of like minorities and majorities together to find the commonality, to discover those differences and like stack the diverse thought that you were talking about earlier when you were speaking? And like, is that on us as minorities to like seek out those relationships, or is that more of a two-way street? Like, sorry, I know it's a loaded question. There's a lot in there, but it's just my thoughts.
No, that's a great question. And I'll go back to my experience behind Ferguson. It has to be a two-way street. We have to be willing to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So that's why in all of my talks, I talk about using your time after 5, finding diverse groups to hang with, because diversity and inclusion tends to be in 8 to 5 conversation. We try to figure out, how do we diversify workspace? How do we diversify, school? But after 5 o'clock, we all go our separate ways, because we go to what we're used to. And so we have to be creative and intentional in creating space to gather. My daughter came to Omaha this weekend for Thanksgiving, and I always pick her brain just about how might we do things better, for her generation. I don't like to speak for generations. I don't want to hear those voices. And she talked about, Omaha has to create a space so that people like me can go be creative, but we want to be creative with people who are retirement age. We don't just want to hang out all the time with our age. And I thought about that. I was thinking, Omaha's done a great job of creating space for young professionals. And I'm repeating what I was told. to drink and hang out, but we've not done a good job in Omaha creating space for creatives, creating space, you know, for food, for eating, for arts, just for talking with soft music behind us. And those are things that we can do and invite others to come join us in those spaces. But being intentional, reaching out, finding people who are different and saying, let's go grab coffee. It's not just on minorities. It has to be something that's on non-minorities as well, and being able to find those people who are willing to do that.
I would just add that we are creatures of habit. We like what's familiar because it's the easiest. It's also sometimes even we may not intentionally recognize it, but it's also very ignorant also because we're jeopardizing ourselves from a phenomenal learning experience. And we need to recognize that when you look at who's entering healthcare today, it is those of diverse cultures because we're becoming more diverse. And there are more women who are also entering into med school for the first time than before. And we need to look at that we're only as strong as our weakest link. And if we don't get outside ourselves, we're going to trip all over ourselves. And J1 visas for many years when I worked in rural health, that was who we had in rural health. And we would never have imagined smaller communities that are a little more isolated or remote from their experiences to have that collective sense of wisdom and language and culture and different religions. And that genesis actually was an outreach growth to recognize that that is a center of an opportunity. And so I think when you look at RAC Monitor or some of these other toolkits that are maybe outside of your general curriculum, and you see some of these pilot models that are taking place in communities for scholarships and different types of application models within delivery of care, you'll see that there's much more of a multicultural perspective, and that's very much embedded in social determinants of health. So I think we're being more cognizant and much more deliberate of that. We might always, again, go to what is familiar, but we need to go to what is extra special and mysterious and the mystic of what I had mentioned through Native American health and the way we live and think. And to that celebration of diversity is a unifier.
That's going to have to be the last word. Unfortunately, this is a conversation that we could just say to be continued. I want to thank both of our presenters for a great time and sharing us your wisdom and insights. And let's give them one last round of appreciation.
And I think that we would both give you applauses because thank you for your intentionality, for being very deliberate. And we know you've got lots of studies and demands. So you could have been anywhere, including the library, but you are here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, before you guys go though, we have to give our presenters an award. So we have the Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging Award. We call it the DIBs, or we call it our Emmys. It's awarded to upstanders whose professional life of leadership practices have resulted in an outstanding contribution to diversity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging for historical marginalized group. And on this note, I personally, on behalf of Dr. Johnson, I want to say thank you to Dr. Ali-Dinar and Ms. Jeffery. I know you guys are super busy, and out of everything, you still made time to come. Your generosity of spirit speaks more eloquently than anybody can about the love you guys have for marginalized group. I just want to say thank you. So I'm going to present the first award to Dr. Ali-Dinar. You can come. So we're going to present this award to you for your unwavering support and outstanding contribution to diversity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging for historical marginalized groups in our community. Thank you. Now, Miss Jeffrey, I appreciate you so much. So we have awarding our own Amy to you for your unwavering support and outstanding contribution to diversity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging for historical marginalized group in our community. And thank you for picking Omaha to come. I appreciate it. So thank you guys. You know, this is a series, a 3-part series. So another round of applause